Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in Veteran Voices. I'm your host, Mary Kate Saliva. Veteran Voices is a podcast part of the Supply Chain Now family, wherever you can get your podcast from. We are a podcast that loves to interview veterans who are serving beyond the uniform. And I'm so excited about our special guest who's going to be mentioning some great things about Best Defense, Warrior Alliance, 4 Block, and Vetlanta. As we say, it takes sometimes the whole village to take care of us complex creatures. But Veteran Voices is also part not only of the Supply Chain Now family, but in proud partnership with the Guam Human Rights Initiative, an organization near and dear to my heart that is helping to advance research in Guam and Micronesia. You can check them out at guamhri.org. And without further ado, we'd like to welcome our guest, Kurt Robinson, Air Force veteran, and also a longtime proud employee at Delta. So thank you so much for joining me today, Kurt.
Oh, no, thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on because I know we had a chance to speak, and I know you have stories for days that we could talk about today. And I know we only have a limited time, but I want to dive right in and would love if you would share your favorite motivational quote with all of us to pump us up and get started.
I would say it's from Winston Churchill. Attitude is the little thing that makes a big difference.
No, I
Just
love that.
believe that attitude, no matter what happens, shows where you can go, changes you can make, and how you can survive.
I think that's so important too, the attitude that we go into it. I think oftentimes when we're serving, we say it's like about going through the suck together, because we're all wet, we're all tired, we're all
Yeah.
we're all hungry. But it's about the attitude, and you could probably think of that one individual, that one airman, and I know for me, it's that soldier that was the comedian or the one that was really amped up and motivated to get us through that. But I think that aligns really well in the outside world as well. Thank you
Oh, and
for
it
sharing.
does. And if someone's having a hard day, you can tell if their attitude changes, things tend to get better.
Yes, and having the right attitude. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great way to kick off the episode. And I would love to dive in about where you grew up. I think this is one of the parts of the show that I love that I think makes it unique from other shows. I think it tells a lot about who we are, where we came from. So I'd love to if you could share a bit about where you grew up.
Oh, absolutely. So I grew up actually in Ossining, New York. It's about 45 minutes north of the city on the Hudson River. Uh, and that was kind of where I stayed all the way in until I went into the Air Force. So I was in New York the whole time. And then the Air Force actually put me back in New York, upstate New York, in Rome, New York. So I guess I kind of got that New York piece I just can't kick out.
Yeah, do you still say when people ask where you're from that you're from New York, or has Georgia taken you by the reins?
I think there's certain words that they know from New York. I guess it's that the especially like water when you say water, a little
Water.
different in different areas. So when I do say it, he's definitely from New York, but my friends from New York think I'm from Georgia now. So I kind of lost a little bit of the deep language with them.
Oh gosh, you're the chameleon, so you kind of get blended in either way. No, I love that. And did you grow up in a big family? Did you have that military influence at all growing up from anybody in the your own
I did
family
grow
or,
up in
or
big
friends, teachers?
Yep, I did grow up in a big family. We had five of us.
Wow.
From a military perspective, I had four uncles out in World War II and a grandfather in World War One. But it was a little bit different growing up. My dad left us at a young age and left my
Mm.
mom with five kids, right? So you grow up quick that way. And at that point, no, there wasn't a military person, I would say, until my stepfather came into the picture years
Mm.
later. And he was actually an Air Force veteran. He worked on B-30 I'm an avionics mechanic.
Oh wow. And I was wondering too, like where in the line of the five are you?
So I'm in the middle, kind of the
No.
one that, your your two brothers did what they did, and you're in the middle, got to do whatever you wanted to do, right? And then the youngest. But when my dad left us, mom, amazing lady, and she is my hero.
Mm.
She was left with five kids at a very young age to make it work, right? So she laid out the rules, we followed them. It's kind of like being in the military structure. I enjoyed it.
No, I love that. And is it all boys? Because I know you
Now
mentioned
it
two
was
brothers.
actually one girl and four boys.
Oh my
So
goodness. Where is she? She's probably, she's well, the youngest one?
now she's right under me. A younger brother I had under that.
Oh
So we call
goodness.
her the queen
Yes.
because she was the only girl in the group.
Oh my goodness. I was like, imagine having all those older brothers or all the brothers in school. No, so I love what you mentioned about your stepdad being in the Air Force as well, because I always think it's interesting about why people ended up choosing the branch that they did, because you have other options, but sometimes it is influencing the family, and sometimes it's just a fancy catch saying on a billboard in the town. But would love to hear about why the Air Force for you.
Well, that is an interesting story because I actually initially took the test to go into the Navy. Uh, so what I
See?
did was I was I was in college, finishing my 2 year degree, had that in aerospace. I would love the side of the house. Uh, and for some reason, when I got out, I was going to college for trying to finish up, and school's not for everybody at that point in your life. So I made a turn and decided to go into the military. At that point, I actually went to the Navy recruiter, and with the education, he goes, "Hey, you can come in at this level of rank." And air traffic control was what they targeted. And I said, "Okay." So as I walked out the door, because I wasn't too sure I wanted air traffic control, the air office, and he goes, "Well, we have air traffic controllers. We got all sorts of stuff." And he transferred my test stuff over to them. And then from that point, it was heavy maintenance on aircraft, which is really what I love doing. So I just stayed with the Air Force at that point and continued down the journey.
And didn't look back. So
Never looked back. No, I
I
never
have to
looked back.
say, Kurt, I feel like you're the first one that like Air Force wasn't the first pick. And usually it's that the Air Force was on a long lunch break and they tried to go and nobody was in the office, and so they had to go down the hall and the Army's like, come to us. Or the Marines
Well,
are like, we'll take
he
you.
might have just been coming back from lunch.
That sounds like the Air Force is like they already got the line down the hallway, so they don't even have to worry about trying to pull people in. So the Marines are like, you come do a pull-up challenge with us. No, I think that yeah, I just love that. Love that little tidbit.
Yeah, they did get nervous because when we were leaving New York, the American Airlines was supposed to get on their flight and it was canceled, and they didn't want us to leave. So what they did was there's an old Army barracks right before you go over Staten Island Bridge, and
Hmm.
they opened that up and cleared the dust out to keep us there for the night. So then when we're down a late day late getting down to Texas, but it was kind of interesting because they're like, we can't let you go at this point. You got to stay with us.
Yeah, it's like you're stuck now.
Yeah.
So no, and that's how it happens sometimes. It's like we think we're going in, and that might be the one and only choice that we end up making is by which branch we want, and then after that, it's sort of like not really your choice. Be like, give us your top five, and you'll get the one we want. So no, I love that piece of it too, because like I said, I think everybody else is trying to go Air Force and they were on a long lunch. So I'd love to go straight into your time in the Air Force. And I know you said you ended up loving what you do, which is awesome because I know it's not the same for everybody. But were there sort of any mentors that took you under your wing at that time? No pun intended. But at that time that
Yes,
you'd love to give a
actually,
shout out to.
there was Master Sergeant Robert Walker. Still talk to him today.
Great.
So when I got in and went through all training, I was up at Cash Store in the Upper Peninsula for a little bit, and then I was over at Griffiths, Rome, New York. Base closed now, but at that time we had KC 135s and B-52s. So I
Mm.
was crew and then we cross trained over to the B-52s. Whatever they needed, we could work either aircraft at the end of the day. But Master Sergeant Walker took me under his wing, and he goes, his theory was to give you more than he ever had as an opportunity. So a year to two into the Air Force, working for him, I realized he goes, "Hey, what do you want to do next?" And I never had anyone ask me that question. And he goes, "I'm here to help whatever you need." So At that time, Amory Riddle was on campus at the
Mm.
base. So he goes, you need to go back and finish up your education. I said, okay, I'm going. And I said, but I'm working afternoon shifts because you worked what you had to. He goes, that's fine. Go to class and then just stay late. Right. We had that opportunity. I know a lot of folks did not in the military, but he did everything. And he was kind of the boss you'd do anything for. Right. So it wasn't about the rank. It was about the person that was sitting there. And then after that, I was getting towards the end of it. And he goes, go back. And now I went back and got, because I didn't know if I was going to stay in or not.
Mm.
But he made sure I was set up to make that decision, right? Whether I would stay or whether I would leave the military after my first enlistment. So I always look back at him, I always thank him every year, because time I talk about a leader, he's the number one, and even after all these years, that I give him credit for what he did, and he did it for all of us.
I love the piece that you said about him just he asked your thoughts, right? And it's sometimes even at such a young age that we don't think about that and planning for the future. We're just looking at
Right.
what's in front of us and how can we make it through today without getting yelled at or falling short of what needs to happen for the mission. And or even the annual evaluations, right? We're just looking for that maybe a year ahead or to the next PCS, but we're not looking at the future. So I love that he encouraged your higher education and just seeking out that next step, but really taking it into like, what do you want to do? And sort of fostering that instead of forcing a different agenda on you, I think is fantastic. And unfortunately, sometimes rare and few and far between. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that about him.
And he
And
also,
yeah.
in the military, you have the below the zone. And he came to me one day, he's, come on, we have to go talk to the commander. So I was a sergeant at the time. And he goes, you just got it. And here's your staff sergeant stripes if you'd like them. But the base commander goes, all right, there's a hitch on this one, which I wasn't expecting. He said, you need to re-enlist to
Mm.
get the stripes, right? And I said, so we were walking out, and I remember the conversation with Sergeant Walker, about making choices what you want to do. And he knew I was leading more towards an officer role if I stayed. So the next weekend, the base commander gave me 3 days to make the decision. Walked in his office and I said, I think I'm going to go. And then he handed me a recommendation letter for OTS. He said, all right. He said, I heard you might go left or right. So whichever direction you want, best of luck. Here you go. So it made it tough to leave at the time, but he was backing me 100% through those decisions.
No, and I love that you had somebody there to make that decision with. Sometimes it's quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I'd love to hear a bit more about what made you like some of the things that you were thinking about at that time for transition and what made you decide this was it, especially with something like a promotion. Because when I was transitioning during the pandemic, I had some buddies that were going to transition with me, and then they dangled a bonus in front of them. It's like, if you re-enlist, you get all this money. And they're like, oh, that kind of looks kind of good, Mary Kate, because we don't, there's no guarantee
Correct.
about what our employment is, but we can guarantee we're going to get the carrot. So some of them stayed. And I'd love to hear your story about that. What made you choose to get out?
Well, when I was looking at it, I always, like everyone in aviation, I think, always wanted to fly. So when I was working I was going to go get license work on the outside, the Aero Club on the base really couldn't pay us. So we swapped flight hours for working on the planes, right? And you don't have a lot of money back then. So at
Mm.
that point, we'd work on the planes and then get free flight hours. So I started flying and I always wanted to do that. And then what happened was once I got the degree, in the military, because that's what you needed to start, I took the test and there was no pilot slots available at the time. So I was back and forth. My chief wanted me to stay. He was funny. He goes, last day when I was getting ready to go, he took me out in his 240Z, did some donuts in the parking lot. He goes, hey, if you stay with us, you can do this when you're a chief. So I was kind of laughing, right? But I said at that
Make a
point,
decision on a donut.
yeah, it was fun. He was having a blast, but he's like, as a chief, I could do what I want on the base, right? So he was enjoying it, trying to say this is where you could be down the road. But since I set up to go try something, I told them I'm going to go out, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to come back. But I felt like at that time it was the right time to make the move, and I felt like I was prepared to do it.
That was, and I think that that piece that you just said about you felt you were prepared for it. I think there's a lot of comfort and peace in knowing that you made the decision for you and not for anybody else. And that's important. And I think sometimes with the transition, it's not, people aren't ready for the transition, whether it was like a medical discharge, they just weren't ready for it. So you had a vision in mind about getting into aviation. And how many years did you end up serving total?
So I
As
served
a-
4 years,
yeah,
and I did my one enlistment. A lot of folks are getting out early at that point, but I stayed the
yes.
whole time. I wasn't in the bucket, and I was good with that because I had plans going. If things
Hmm.
would have changed if they asked me a year earlier, then, but timing for me was working out okay.
That's great. And the transition piece for you, what was available at that time, if anything? Or was it like you
Well,
said, a piece of paper and have good luck to you?
that's about what it was back then. I mean, there was not a lot of help on anything. So if you didn't have a plan on where you wanted to go and what you needed to get there, and you were
Mm.
just walking out the door, it wasn't, you were kind of out there. I remember Pratt and Whitney came to our hangars one day it was probably about halfway into it, and there was a lot of folks I had in our phase dock area we were in that were just about to get out, and they had no plans. And Pratt came in and offered them all a job immediately because of their experience. So they walked out with a job. But at that point, I'm like, if you're not ready, you're just not, you're going to walk out into the unknown. And there was no one to help you. You had to chart your course, and make a thing. There wasn't great organizations like Four Block today we see, and a bunch of the other ones and I do coach at Four Block to help them and also connect them with Delta. And we do a lot with them too, to help the veterans transition, to get their resumes correct, to get their LinkedIn profiles correct. We didn't have all of that. I mean, I'll date myself. I got out back in '89. So back then we did not have a lot to help you. So you kind of charted your own course.
No, and I think that there's so much to say about that because it, I don't know, some people, the Gen Z might think 80s was a long time ago, but I still feel like it wasn't that long ago. Well, like the 80s, I'm like, that's still within my lifetime. I'm an 80s baby. But that to think that it wasn't that long ago that there was nothing. I have so many
Yeah.
of my guests that served during that 80s, early 90s, they were like, there was nothing. And to think now how far we have come as a veteran community and the veterans that were on the other side already that are reaching back to help out. So I'd love if you could share, because some of our listeners are transitioning service members, maybe going through that period of, or maybe they may be on the fence right now. What advice would you give to them regarding their transition?
If you're getting ready to transition, a few things is you have to have your plan on where you think you want to go. And then whatever industry that is, and it's hard, a lot of us have a hard time taking their military career and what does that mean in the civilian world, right? Mine was a little easier because I look at it from the perspective, I went from aircraft maintenance to a lucky to get into a major airline and aircraft maintenance, right? So different aircraft, but we're doing a lot of the same stuff. It's easier transition. But if I didn't go get my license, I never would have got hired by Delta back then because
Mhm.
your license allows you to do it in the civilian world. So whatever it is, you've got to figure out that connection, and you've got to look for a company culture today that is military friendly. And I say that because I've had the pleasure of being here for over 34 years at Delta Airlines. And a lot of folks I work with, we're in the high 30s. We came out of the military and we've been here for over 30 years because of the culture, right? Every company has their ups and downs, right? In airline industry, we have a lot of ups and downs, right? What kept us at the airline is the culture of the people. So the day one I walked into the hangars, boom, I knew all the military guys that were there all came up, right? All our toolboxes had this branch of service you were in because we'd always kind of get after each other on that, right? And
The
so it
best
just
part.
started building that family piece. So looking back, target those companies, right? And then don't be afraid to get in somewhere and work your way through. I tell everybody when I do the 4 block stuff and all the transition pieces is some people get so focused on a title and a
Mm.
position that you really lose focus, because that's just money at the end of the day. But if you get the right company and you stay there, you'll build to those levels. I've had multiple jobs at the company over these years, never got bored. And at the end of the day, you can progress to wherever you want. Don't get focused on my title. I have to be at this level. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that.
I think you're right. And sometimes what the current situation that we're having in the military, we're so quick to want to go, especially if we get out before. That's why I wanted to hear your story so much, because there are service members who are getting out now before the 20-year retirement. That was typical back then. And now it's they're more often than
Correct.
not, they're transitioning earlier. So they're walking out the door without a retirement, or maybe without that college degree. And so I think that key piece that you mentioned about that license that you got, and now there's available resources for certifications for service members serving now to get after that. So you know what employers are looking for. But that company culture piece is huge, because there's still that statistic. I don't know where that number is at now, but that transitioning service members, even post active duty, active service, end up in 2 or 3 jobs in their first few years. So the fact that you have
Correct.
stayed with Delta over 30 years, I think is incredible. And just a huge shout out to Delta for taking care of their people, and especially their veterans. And you said there's some others like you, that so there's other
Yes.
veterans that have been there over 30 years.
Oh, there's a lot of us. There's that. I
Oh my
mean, when I got
goodness.
hired into Delta, I would say 80% of our maintenance was pretty much military. Uh, it's changed over the years, of course, and our group is probably 90+%, right? So because of what we've done in the military and all branches of the service, right? Our jobs kind of transition very easy into the airline industry. And I say that from the perspective of you've got a mission, you got a goal, you got safety, the plane's got to go. So like 3,000 plus flights a day are leaving today, right? So
Wow.
what better organization than a military background fits with that, right? We're a goal, we're initiative, we know what we got to do, we move on to the next job. So I think it naturally brings folks to the area. But there's tons of over the last 8 years, and I just stopped in February. My term's finally ran out. I've had the honor of leading our veterans BRG. So 3 years as the VP, 5 years as the president. Turned it over, just voted in, was Teresa Livingston, an amazing person. And she's actually also just retired from military, lieutenant colonel. So she's got a huge military background and has done some amazing things. So she's now our new president of the Veterans BRG. And in that organization, we have over 11,000. We have 11,000 at the company, Delta Airlines, and we have about 1,500 members in there actively helping in their communities. Right. So you connect that way with your other veterans and move through. So it's kind of one of those pieces. And a lot of that keeps you at the company. Because we joke around and we got some great guys doing volunteer work, care packages, Mark Morris from the hangar. And then the company steps in a lot, and we do for our Veterans Day event. We do a huge Veterans Day event. Mark actually started it years ago with the Shadow Box. Today, it's a corporate event. We all kick in and support, and we have over 40 military aircraft in 2 days, right? And the company stops and allows us to do this and recognizes it, right? That's what keeps you at a company, right? It's not just billboard out there. It's actually what happens when you're internal.
No, gosh, the company culture, it definitely sounds like a second family to stay somewhere for that long. And as I mentioned, even for military, 20 years, it's like that's a retirement. But to stay in
Yeah.
over 30 and continue to love what you do and continue to do the work that you're doing is amazing. And the skills that you're able to bring to the table, but the fact that you have a veteran community within Delta, and I love that you all have um, do they refer to them their is it resource group, the
Yeah, we,
employee
we used to be an employee network group, and now it's a business resource group, which is
business
actually
resource group?
when we changed. Originally, I was in the employee, it was called employee network. But when you go to a business resource group, for most corporations now, you have a lot more support, right?
Mm,
And
it's great.
and we're involved in decision. They'll ask us on military stuff. A good example is years ago we sat with our town acquisition team and said, hey, we sat down with them and asked them, hey, why don't we have a military hiring program? Right? These are the benefits. These are the people you get. They're flexible. They're highly skilled. They can work through problems and initiatives. Right? Everything we do in the military. Right? Because plans don't. Every morning we launch 3,000 plus flights. Right? Sometimes you're going to have a hiccup. Right? You need people that can make those adjustments and fix it and go. So today we actually, from that conversation over probably 6 years ago, now we have a military recruiting team that goes to bases, right? So as we push this more through the company, and now we're actively recruiting, right? Which is getting visibility through the whole company. Great thing to do. And then one of the other things I do have to brag about, two things on the group, is last year the veterans group for us won the Warrior Alliance Award for the Veterans Impact Award. Amazing opportunity to be recognized by your community, right? So you think you're doing good inside and you hope you're helping people, because that's what it's about. Yeah. And then an outside agency that does amazing things to support veterans. If you're struggling at all, that's a group you want to reach out to, from a legal, from housing to benefits. They'll help you get connected. And then they recognized us for being one of the best in the Atlanta area for helping areas, right? Amazing group. And then 3 years ago, we connected with the Best Defense Foundation, on Delta. And this is the third year we're going to take World War II folks back to Normandy. And it started as a grassroots. Virginie, who's in global sales, called me one day and she said, hey, I've got Early War Freedom. She knew that she met the director, and it's it's a documentary of thanking our World War II veterans. So we turned around and looked at that. She sent it to me. We worked together. We got it on our flight, on our IT system for people to see. And then that led to hooking up with the Best Defense Foundation, another amazing organization. Donnie Edwards runs it. He's actually Kansas City Chief, NFL player, retired. And his buddies seen him on the video and connected with him and said, hey, how'd you get on the Delta flight? And then that together and talking, and next thing you know, we went and we're putting together, can we put a charter back to Normandy with these veterans, right? Amazing folks. Donnie and Catherine run that foundation, just amazing people. And then finally we got to that point. I sent an email to Ed and asked him, our CEO, because he's a huge veteran supporter, which over the last 8 years, I can't thank him enough for all his support. He shot it back to me and said, then we had the team on there that we worked up to that point. I just happened to be the one letter request at the end of the day. And he shot it back, get a plane, go to Normandy. So that turned into a 3-year, going on a 3rd-year venture. And talking to these World War II guys is just amazing. This year, I have the honor, now that I'm not in the president's spot, but I'm going to go back as one of their caregivers. And I'll be with one of the World War II guys the whole time. Tom is the guy I'm attached to. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. I talked to him yesterday. The stories he'll tell you are just amazing. And then the initial part, I hooked up with Neil, another World War II veteran. He was in the Pacific and all of this. Great guy. We talk a lot, but just amazing stories, and just stop and listen to him is just great.
And when I already just get congratulations on all fronts with that. And it takes individuals like yourself, veterans like yourself, to really push and identify those gaps and speak up about them. And gosh, what a great thing that you're doing for the World War II veterans. My family loves going to the World War II air show in Reading, Pennsylvania. And we love sitting down and you see the kids with their little autograph books, and because they really are that great generation, and to talk to them. And gosh, I wish it was like with you having that chance to just one-on-one and speak for a long time to hear their stories. What a blessing that is, to be able to do that. So thank you for doing that, Delta, for doing that. It's so needed. And gosh, I'm like, I don't want to like dive into that one, but I know the limited time on the episode, I was like, gosh, I want to hear more about what's going on over there, what you do with them in Normandy. But we'll have to stay tuned. Could you shout out you said there was a film out there?
Yeah, The Girl Who Wore Freedom.
Okay.
And it's a great documentary. And the trips we've been over is just amazing, the way the people of France and Normandy treat our World War II veterans. They're like heroes.
Absolutely.
In the parades, I mean, they're trying to get their signatures. They're giving them signatures, and it's just amazing of that how appreciate they appreciate them for the freedom they have today, all the way to the students in the classroom, right? So that's it's just amazing when you go there and see all that. I recommend everybody.
Yes.
It's got to be on your bucket list if you serve to get over to Normandy just to see it, or even if it's not during the big events, go over there and see because it's an amazing place where they do recognize what our World War II heroes did for them. And then on the other side with that is just as you know, over the last 20 plus years, we've had a lot of our veterans in conflicts throughout that. So in addition to that, we try to do a great job to recognize everyone that serves. That is the greatest generation, but we have a lot of folks coming back that need some help and are struggling, right? And we need to reach out there and make sure we're helping them because they're where they've done for the last 20 plus years. The average American, I would say, is probably forgotten about that, right? They don't realize what's really going on a lot of stuff. And these folks have been in harm's way for over 20 plus years coming out. So they need our help too. So we need to make sure we're doing everything we can in your local communities to help every veteran that's coming
Yes.
out right now and their families.
That's such a great point because I did learn that sort of the hard way. I was referring different organizations to veterans that I know, but they would come back to me and say, Mary Kate, they don't help Cold War era, or it's only post 9/11 veteran. And just know, like what you said, to be able to service all veterans and or even to have that resource instead of just turning that veteran away to say like, oh, we don't do that, but check out this other organization who does do that. And I think that
Yeah.
that's so powerful. And what you said about making it, everybody should have that on their bucket list. I'm like, it should be on the bucket list right now. I noticed for me, but while we still have World War II veterans still with us, such an
Yeah.
honor because it's going to come to a point where we are just going to the beach and we don't have them here with us anymore. And to be able to do it now, like you said, as a caregiver, thank you for stepping up to do that. I think that's absolutely incredible. And I know you're going to have the time of your life again this year. So I'd love to talk now is to segue into those organizations since we were just talking about them. I had mentioned earlier in the episode Best Defense, Warrior Alliance, 4 Block, and Vetlanta. There's 4 incredible organizations that you have ties to. Would love for you to at least touch on 4 Block for sure, because I'm also a graduate of the 4 Block program and you
Okay.
have to coach. But wherever you'd like to start, I'd love to hear about your service with these organizations.
Well, absolutely. So one thing you'll realize when you're supporting veterans, and they all do a very special piece, or some do all of it. You just don't know. So I'll start at the top where I had the Warrior Alliance we talked about. They recognize us. When I first met the organization, Scott introduced me and called me up and said, Kurt, this is what we do. What we loved about it was we already supported the organizations they were sending veterans in to get help. And they
Mm-hmm.
just come up top and send you there and they track you, make sure you're doing okay in anything from housing to legal to whatever you need, right? Because if we can help one veteran get better, that's going to help him, her, their families come back to society and be okay, right? And then by that, that's that piece. And when we looked at that, we're still looking at everything they do, and they're connected to Atlanta Braves, right? A little more visibility, but they can get a veteran struggling and help them to be in a positive way, right? Which is what we're all here for. When you look at some organizations like the Best Defense Foundation, they do an amazing job bringing the veterans back. That's what they're there. But they also have the section that they're starting up to help the transitioning veteran, right? The one that's going through some battle fatigue type stuff. So they're just starting that. Another one branching out. But great organizations, small organizations that are trying to just move through the piece. When you look at 4 Block, I'll use them as an example. Back in COVID, before the COVID days, Roger called me up and he goes, hey, Kurt, we started talking about the different 4 Blocks and what we could do. So I said, Doc, let me go see. So I started coaching them, and the impact you can make talking to somebody. And every company is different. So you'll hear my culture just because what I've done, and another company is totally different. Doesn't mean it's wrong for anybody because your culture might align more the other way. So then we started coaching, and now Delta Airlines does sponsor their host nights and everything. And
Oh, really? That's great.
yeah, we do. We've done a bunch in the Atlanta area and some online stuff. Different areas for the online, the West Coast and the East Coast, and just trying to help get them introduced and seeing what we can do to help. And I think it's such an amazing, it's the only organization we've found that actually has a solid structure to help somebody. And if you follow their program, it's going to help you be successful on the other side. And it's going to give you the tools you need. And you might not get it on the first job, but at the end, it'll give you. So 100% supporter. I haven't coached the last couple of semesters because my Delta, my workloads, I've been on the road too much. So I haven't been able to do that back to in person. But I'll be starting that back up again now that some of my traveling has slowed down.
I love how you
So that
mentioned
was those.
Roger, because I love how you mentioned Roger too, because I remember my phone call with him. I actually remember where I was when I talked to him on the phone, but I ended up going through 4 Block through their virtual cohort. So since I was at Fort Liberty at the time, and so I loved the experience that I had through there and the support that I had. But I do remember that call with Roger, and I think it's so important to have that touch point with folks who've already been there, who are on the other side, because it is scary, you know.
It
And
is.
I for some guys, they'd rather jump out of an airplane again and multiple times than to go through the transition piece. But to know that we're going through transitions continuously in life, but that one coming off of active service, especially if you made a career out of it, it is really challenging. And sometimes the ones who need it the most are the ones that have stayed in for the long haul. But
And I agree with that.
you
We
know,
see that a lot. Sometimes they're the ones that they've done so much for their country and they're used to the positions they're in, and that transition's kind of hard because they're going to lose a lot of that. It's in the commercial field that you do not gain rank by long term, right? It's all about what you did today, what you're doing tomorrow, what you're getting better. A little different twist than I've been in so long. So there's opportunities that come. Commercial world, some of that opportunities do not come based on your seniority at the company. You've got to actually be maneuvering. And if you've done it in the military, you have the skill set to do it in the commercial field.
oh, that's a great point.
Some folks just don't know it, right?
That's a great, yeah. And I was saying, like, with that film White Christmas, because that song that Bing Crosby sings, "What do you do with a general when he stops being a general?" I've watched that movie my whole life with my family, and that song never made more sense to me than I was sitting there the year that I was transitioning off active duty, and I watched that movie with my dad, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this song's about transition." It's like this is speaking to me right now. It's like, what do you do? What do you do with a general when he stops being a general? Yeah, and I just thought that's so powerful what you said, and it's so important. And I know you have another organization that you wanted to shout
I
out
got
to.
one
Yeah, one more.
in Atlanta. So then
Vet
Atlanta,
Atlanta.
we've been kind of in and out with that Atlanta a little bit over the years. And Lloyd, I've known him for a long time. So he's like, well, Kurt, now that you're not the president of the VBRG anymore, come join us and help us. So I'm a board member on their group to help. But what I love about Vet Atlanta, Lloyd and John, what they do is they connect companies and people together, right? They're making Atlanta the best place for a veteran to live. But what they do is they connect the companies and a veteran, right? It's all about connection, right? So all their summits, if you haven't gone to their summits, you need to go. Everyone needs to go check it out, Vet Atlanta. And that's what they're there for. They're there just to support, but to connect people. So very different. So all 4 of these organizations we talked about, very different goals, right? But they're all excelling in helping veterans, which is what it's all about. So there's, I'd love to do the Vet Atlanta piece and help them out all the time. Now we're going to try to pull some. Gabe is on their board and he's working on their veterans BRG piece. So I'm supporting him to help him whatever he needs to kind of educate, because I still think when you look at what corporate does, if you're looking at a BRG and a veterans BRG, right? If you don't have one at your company, reach out. We want you to have one, right? Help your veterans. And it's not just a veteran supporting a veteran. I mean, just imagine who's made the transition successful, helps one more veteran make a successful transition. How good would that be? Right?
That's what I said about this show. If we had everybody that did like what you did, I mean, I'm happy if they help one organization, but you're helping out like a dozen. So I know even though we named only four, but you've done so much work. And I was like, imagine, Kurt, if other veterans did what you have been doing for years. And but even if it's just for like one community event, the life-changing impact that we can have.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell everybody, as you look at veterans, we want to support 365 days a year. We don't want to support them just over the month of November, right?
Mm.
And the free haircuts on veterans, they are nice, but some of us don't need them anymore. So, those are all nice, but for 365 days a year, if we could help a veteran and their family and
Yes.
just go through and thank them. I always say is, it's even to thank you. So, if you're going, well, I don't know if I got time, everyone's got a little bit of time, right? Volunteer for that one organization that's in your heart. Or hey, next time you go to the gas station and the guy in front of you is in a car with a veteran tag on and a Vietnam hat on, buy his gas. Do a little thing. That's all you have to do. That goes a long way, right? So take those little pieces, buy them gas, buy them grocery at the store, right? We see it. A lot of them are going to be shocked you did it, but at the end of the day, they're going to thank you and tell you probably a few stories, and then just stop and listen. Give them an
And they
extra
won't
minute,
forget it, right? And it
and they'll
sticks with
never
you. And I
forget.
know some of us, our memories aren't as like they used to be. I feel like mine's already like that. But I was like, I still a little fuzzy, but you don't forget that feeling that somebody had for you. I remember one time even with I was out for lunch with my buddies. We were in uniform and I was the only female soldier sitting at the table. The waitress came over and was like, "Your meal was paid." And the guys were like, "Oh, who?" And she's pointing at these older ladies. And she's like, "Oh no, they only paid for her meal." And and the, and the guys were like, "Wait, what?" And we're all in uniform, but it was so funny. And the ladies came over and they were saying how one of them her granddaughter had just joined the service and she just thought that was so great. And I just thought it was the funniest thing. I mean, I'll never forget it. It totally made my day because I always felt like I was kind of in their shadow. Like I love them
Yeah.
like brothers, but it was so nice to just to just be to have a little elbow jab at them. But you're absolutely right. Something simple as paying for gas, you're already there, and it's not taking up too much time out of your way. And then sharing these resources. I'm a lot about especially the power of social media. We have the world at our fingertips. I continuously learn about new organizations that are out there. And then the piece that I wanted to highlight is about how you went to Delta, because even though Delta had veterans since like obviously hiring you day one over 30 years ago, there was still much that Delta could learn as an employer about hiring veterans and establishing an actual like pipeline, streamlining that pipeline for veterans and going out to the bases. So I think that that's a great point to make too to employers out there as well about continuously looking at what they're doing to be able to engage those communities and the spouses as well and caregivers.
Correct. And we don't want to forget about the families, right? And that's a lot of us are just starting to branch off to the family side. And Fort Block also has an amazing group that they do the veteran and they do the veteran's family, the spouse.
Yes.
So there's organizations like that you can reach out and really get some help. And I always like to say to and we don't. I don't know if it's something we get drawn into us when we serve, but it's hard to reach out for help. But if you're struggling, reach out for help. There's enough veterans out there that are willing to help. There's enough organizations, but sometimes you have to ask and get it started, right? Have coffee with another veteran and just talk to them, right? And then see if that leads to something where you can get more help. But don't be afraid because it's our honor to help. We just
Yes.
sometimes need to know.
No, it is an honor to help. And I know for me, I one of the things that I love about serving now is to see call them the pioneers. Like we're at a time where we still have like the World War II and all these and all the veterans that have come through in the different wars of conflicts when our country was going through so much change. And I love history and I love the stories. And I think just even keeping, I had a Vietnam veteran that asked if I would just sit with him he's a recent widow, and he just wanted someone to sit there and keep him company. Like he
Yeah.
didn't want anything. He just wanted someone to sit there and just be present with him. And, just to be able to give that to him at that time is amazing. And there's so many veterans I've met since then. But thank you for shouting those out, Kurt. I would love to ask if you had any sort of tidbits. I know you have continuous advice, but I know that our listeners will likely want to reach out to you, and was wondering if you could share a bit about how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn, Kurt KRT Robinson. You'll see me out there. Just reach out, send me a note. Anything I can do to help or help you get in the right direction, please send it to us. We've got a good network, and a lot of times if I can't do something, I could get you hopefully to a person that can help, right? So just reach out. There's a lot of us out there. And then on that note, if you see any companies find veterans at them, reach out and talk to them too. Because if you make that initial connection, right? And I always tell everybody on the LinkedIn side, I learned this in Fort Block because it was very interesting too, as coaching, is just don't send me a LinkedIn request, add something to it. So we, kind of know what you're looking for, what you want to do, and let's meet versus just a LinkedIn generic request. So just a little intro and details. This way we kind of know who, when a LinkedIn request comes in, I'll know who you're talking to and why.
No, that's so important. Sometimes it makes a person's day. I love when I get notes from veterans to just say like, I came across one of your episodes, or I heard that you're the one to connect with regarding XYZ, and so it means a lot. Just adding that little one sentence or two to connect and put a real person behind the name.
Right.
Thank you so much, Kurt, for joining today. I wanted to. Do you have any last closing remarks? Before we close up and finish off our episode, even though I know we could go all day.
That just
So,
want just want to just want to thank everybody that served in your family. And please, if we can help, let us help. General Hooper in Middle State, Tennessee runs a veterans center. And one of the things he told me one day when we were talking that really resonates is not every veteran is doing so bad, right? But if you do one little piece that prevents them from ever going down, that's what we're here for. So reach out, talk to us. And if you're a veteran out there, ask yourself, I hung up my uniform. Am I doing anything for my brothers and sisters? And if you're not, look in that local community and find something. For anything from putting wreaths on graves every year when everybody does it, right? So just find something to help the other veterans and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. And thank you all for joining us on Veteran Voices, whether this is your first time or you're returning. We hope to see you back again next time right here. Veteran Voices you can get wherever you get your podcast from. Again, we are part of the Supply Chain Now family of podcasts, and we are a proud partnership with the Guam Human Rights Initiative. And you can check out more about them at guamhri.org. Thank you, Kurt, for the special shout out of Best Defense, Warrior Alliance, 4Block, and Vet Atlanta. Go check out those incredible organizations. And as Kurt said, send him a note, check him out on LinkedIn and connect. He's a wealth of knowledge. Take advantage of that. And as we love to say here on Veteran Voices, do good, pay it forward, and be the change that's needed. We'll see you all next time. Take care.